Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's debriefing on the recent UN Human Rights Council Universal Periodic Review of Rwanda. I'm Lisa Borden, and I'm a staff attorney in international justice at the Advocates for Human Rights. I'm pleased to have with me today my Advocates for Human Rights colleague, Amy Bergquist, and my colleague, Carter Mickelson, along with two guests who are here to help us understand the country and regional context in which the review of Rwanda is taking place. We're concealing their identities today for their safety, so they won't be on camera. And we have changed their names for today's debrief. Jeff is from Rwanda and has some personal experiences with some of the issues and recommendations we'll be talking about today. And also with us is Isaac, who comes from Rwanda's neighboring country, Uganda, and will be offering some additional regional perspectives. Jeff, if you could just take a minute to give our viewers your thoughts generally about what the human rights situation is in Rwanda and how you would hope that the international community through the UN might be able to help address some of the problems that you see.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, share some of the thoughts I have on my country. Yeah, human rights in Rwanda. Yeah, there are a lot of issues related to human rights, and they are good. I think I think the human rights in Rwanda has two sides, and one side is positive and the other one is negative. When you see there are a lot of things that have been done to raise gender right, mostly for women. Women have been helped because they were traditionally underrepresented, and but for for certain time the government just put in place some laws, and then they promoted women, and that's the good thing for human rights. I think the government has done so far. But on the other side is not good. We have seen and heard disappearance of people who are opponents, people who wanted to speak on negative side of the government, and and I think the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, that's the one of the worst side of human rights in Rwanda. Yeah, yeah. So I don't know if this is an introduction, but yeah, I think I can stop right here, and then yeah, I can elaborate this after.
Perfect. And Isaac, do you have any other thoughts about that coming from a country next door to Rwanda? I know there are a lot of Rwandan refugees who have been in Uganda.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There is uh, a lot that you can talk about Rwanda for sure. It hasn't been living up to like the international standards and expectations as regards human rights. Like you say, there are so many like Rwandan refugees residing right now in Uganda. A prominent number actually. But we have seen these are people that have either have left their country because of like uh, being persecuted because of like their like free speech. Uh, and what makes things worse is that uh, the government, the Rwandan government, still follows them up, even uh, where they have afraid to like they follow them up even up to Uganda to inflict harm onto them and onto their families. Uh, so it has not necessarily happened to only like Ugandan Rwandan refugees, but we have seen it happen across the world in South Africa, in Europe, in North America, where like these refugees still, when I've seen like some kind of interviews where they're asked and they say we still don't feel safe even when after leaving the country. So it's really gross that such things happen, and to my surprise, that the government is never held accountable to that. But people still live in fear even after leaving Rwanda. So that one shows you how much the government is so much committed and determined to go after people that go against its undemocratic systems. So it's really been such a such a hard life for these people. So maybe hopefully sometime these people who go after them can be held accountable at some time and their families can get justice.
And mentioning people who have left Uganda, continuing to live in fear.
Yeah.
And as I understand, there have been times when the government has sent Rwandans to live in other countries to keep an eye on Rwandan refugees. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that, and thank you both so much for being here today. For those of you watching, or even if you're watching later, if you have questions at any time, you can feel free to type those into the comments on Facebook, and we'll be happy to see if we can get you a response to those. Before we get to taking a look at some of the review of Rwanda, let's just take a minute to do a brief overview of what the UPR is for those who are watching who might not be familiar or maybe need a refresher. We're going to take a look at this flowchart. And so the Universal Periodic Review is a rolling process that takes place for every member country of the UN every 5 years. It applies to all of them, regardless of which treaties they've ratified. And any human rights issue that other member countries would like to talk about can be addressed. While the other human rights mechanisms at the UN involve expert people who are appointed for their expertise. Unlike those, this process is involved with the diplomatic peers of the delegation whose country is under review. So diplomats make recommendations to other diplomats about what their countries should do to improve human rights, and the country under review has to respond to those recommendations, either by accepting the recommendations or by noting them, which in diplomatic terms means that they're rejected. So this flow chart illustrates the steps of the UPR process and what happens at each step. In the first step, there's a lot of information collected. The country under review submits a national report, and this is also the stage at which organizations like the Advocates for Human Rights can submit a stakeholder report, and we did submit a report about several issues in Rwanda for this cycle. If the country has a national human rights organization, it also submits a report. And then the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights summarizes the NGO and the National Human Rights Institution reports, as well as gathering other relevant information from other UN bodies like the treaty monitoring bodies and other areas. So once all the participants have had an access to all this information and opportunity to analyze it, the next step is the interactive dialogue. And that is the step we're going to be taking a look at today. We'll be watching some clips from the dialogue, and you'll see that because of the pandemic, normally this takes place in the Human Rights Council chamber, and there are a lot of people there, and all the delegates make their recommendations live. But you'll see when we watch these clips today that they're mostly being done by video, and there's very few people who are actually present because of the pandemic. So the country under review usually makes a presentation, including an opening statement, and we'll be seeing a little snippet of that today. And then there's a set period of 3.5 hours for all the speakers, and all of the countries that want to address the country under review sign up, and the time is divided up amongst them. So when there's a large number of countries that would like to speak, there could be a very, very short time for each of them to make their statement and their recommendations. Sometimes it can be under 1 minute. In the case of Rwanda, the amount of time allotted to each speaker was 1 minute and 5 seconds. So you'll see that they have to be very selective in what they want to say, and the statements are very efficient and compact. They usually welcome the country and wish it a successful review, and they might make a general statement about some issue, but the most important part is the recommendations, because that's the only part that the country under review is required to respond to. So once this dialogue is over, there's a report of all the recommendations that's prepared. And sometimes the country under review might say right away which recommendations it accepts or doesn't. But usually this comes at the next stage, when it submits an addendum that shows the recommendations are supported and which are noted. After the council adopts the final report, then the next step in the process is for the country to go and implement the recommendations it has accepted. And then it will report on its progress when the cycle starts all over again. So now let's turn to some of what happened during the review of Rwanda. And the first thing we're going to take a look at is a little bit of the government's opening statement delivered by the Minister of Justice.
I'll be sharing my screen and playing the videos from here. And yeah, so the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Rwanda, two hats for one person, is Mr. Johnston Busingye. And so we'll hear a little bit from him, 2 different clips. Just bear with me as I get it ready. And I have to remember to share my sound as well. There we go. All right.
Investigation and prosecution files. Madam Vice President, during the review, the last review, Rwanda received recommendations on freedom of opinion and expression, freedom of press, and freedom of association and of peaceful assembly. We wish to inform the distinguished working group that these 4 freedoms are enshrined in the Rwandan Constitution of 2003, revised in 2015, and are respected in fact and in law. Consistent action to more expand media space and freedom of expression characterized the last 5 years. As a result, the number of radio stations are now 34, up from 23 in 2011, while the number of television stations increased from 1 in 2011 to 12 in 2016 and 19 in 2019. Registered print and online media houses increased from 73 in 2016 to 161 in 2020. As earlier mentioned, the law determining offenses and penalties in general repealed all press offenses. The satisfaction index of citizens with access to information, as measured by the Rwanda Governance Board, has grown from 52% in 2012 to 94% in 2019. With law, they are accessible and conform to international minimum standards on the treatment of persons deprived of liberty. There are no unofficial detention centers in Rwanda, and as such, the government of Rwanda rejects such unfounded allegations, which we believe are motivated by political interest and agenda of those who advance them. Madam Vice President, allow me to now highlight some developments that we have achieved on access to justice. Recommendations received in 2015 included on prevention of genocide, promotion of unity and reconciliation, and access to justice. In this regard, in 2018, a new law punishing genocide ideology and related crimes was enacted. Rwanda continues to commemorate the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. The reintegration and rehabilitation of former genocide convicts who completed their sentence remains one of the priority programs of the National Unity and Reconciliation Commission. The Ndu Munyarwanda program continues to be implemented countrywide to emphasize the unity of Rwandans that we lost and that we need. In December 20,
So here we have the government of Rwanda very strongly defending the progress that it has made on freedom of expression and freedom of association. And both of you have mentioned that as those areas as areas that you think are still very challenging in Rwanda. How did what the government had to say compare to your experience or your feeling about how those freedoms are being protected in Rwanda today?
Can I go first?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much. I don't think they really say the truth because, and it's really common sickness for most of the Rwandan authorities. They just like to look very good out of the country on the world stage. They just want their image to look really nice, and I think it's okay, but if they should be doing that when they are telling the truth. But when it comes to freedom of expression, assembly, detention center, they don't want to speak anything truth about those topics because they are so severe and they know they have never done anything. I know nothing really has changed in a positive way. It's just getting worse, getting worse. Nothing has been done on freedom of expression. Nothing has been done on assembly of union of the groups that have the opinions that are against the government direction. They have never done anything to allow like different opinions to raise up and challenge them. No, actually, these are the things they really kill even before. I don't know how to say it, but those are the things that are occurred even before they born. They just, it's very difficult to structure because even they just try to kill your opinions before you say them, and even before your opinions are known, they just try to like just to kill, like nothing has to be had against the government, even inside the country. Even you don't even have to, it's even very hard to talk to your friend when you don't trust him because there is this kind of structure of government censorship. Like you don't even trust your brother when it comes to government different, like if it comes to having an opinion different to the government direction, you are not even going to trust your brother, you are not even going to trust anybody. So I don't know how they built that kind of structure, but they did it. And 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 if they say anything about opinion of expression and assembly, you know, it's just totally not true.
Jeff, you mentioned that sometimes it's even if you haven't, they try to block you from having opinions even if you haven't said them. Is it a problem of um, being in danger or under threat if they even think that you have an opinion against the government, even though you maybe haven't said so?
Yeah, I think they have generated enormous fear among the people. Yeah, you don't have to think in other direction other than government. You don't have to say, hey, this we should not be doing things in this way. No, you have to follow the direction they show you. You have to listen. It's a system. Listen and do what they say. Don't give us your opinion. That's what it is.
Isaac, anything to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like when I watched that video, I mean, that's what I was expecting to hear from them because basically they will just lay what they say that they have done just on paper, but it's never done. It's never done. And once you're in the country, you can't dare even thinking about like opposing the government in ways you think that it's going against its own constitution or democratic values. So what has been saying is what I expected him to say. And yeah, people have really been instilled in this kind of fear that they're very, actually, if they just suspect you of thinking otherwise, contrary to the government, either the military will come and pick you up and or you will just disappear in mysterious ways that your family will just stay on looking for your whereabouts, but they will never get to you. So yeah, that's what's on ground.
Thank you.
I have one more thing to share about what the Minister and Attorney General said about detention center.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, it's very strange because there is a detention center. There is very big wreck on the west border of the country between Rwanda and Congo DRC, and then that big wreck there is like a small island, and they take people like if you are doing some of things they have said. Let me take an example. Like they just said we no longer need informal traders. Like you don't have to sell things like those small selling businesses in Kigali city. They are banned. People used to sell like things on their own hands, and then you should go buy things and then walk around in a city and sell things just to make a living, and then when they banned that and police started to catch people who were doing those banned trade, and it's very strange when they catch them, they don't find them, they just take them into custody, and then they transfer them to that island in very big wreck, and they train them like for 6 months, and no one knows how they train them, no one knows what they tell them, no one knows anything. And then after 6 months they release them and they back into the society, but everything is changed, and they just try to make sure that they change them completely. They are no longer going to go against the government rules, or I don't think some, but it's funny, like when I see that, when I used to see, when I was there and I knew about this detention center, and then I will be hearing what is happening in Xinjiang, China, and I was always hearing the word thing about Xinjiang, and I was like, why no one knows about what is happening in Ijwi Island in Rwanda? And it's something that really hurt me, and I don't think they should be doing that. If people are caught doing things that are banned, you can find them, you can take them to the court, but you don't have to go to train them for 6 months. You don't have to go to change the way they think, and it's very bad. It's not good.
Wow, well, thank you for sharing that with us, Jeff. Yeah, you're right. That's not something that that I have heard talked about in the same way that the situation in China is very often discussed. So I think it's good for everyone that's watching to hear about that and know that it's a significant human rights issue for Rwandans. Now let's hear some of the recommendations. So first, we are going to play the recommendations that were made by Chile and by France.
Signor Presidente.
Thank you, President. We welcome the delegation of Rwanda. Chile commends the adoption of the first National Human Rights Plan of Action adopted by Rwanda in 2017. We note the implementation of local initiatives to promote gender equality and empower women, including campaigns to promote women's rights and raise awareness and to prevent gender-based violence. We respectfully recommend 1. Considering ratifying the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons Against Enforced Disappearance. 2. Adopting all necessary measures to prevent, prosecute and eliminate exploitation of children within the sex trade, including within tourism. 3. Combat all forms of violence against women, including domestic and sexual violence. And 4. Align the national legislation with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, eliminating pejorative references to persons with disabilities, which still remain in some laws. Thank you.
Gracias.
Give me a moment and I'll switch to France.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, President. France thanks the delegation of Rwanda for presenting its report. We note the strengthening of the institutional framework on human rights in Rwanda. The ongoing violations of civil and political rights and fundamental freedoms, however, remains a concern. France recommends 1. Ratify the International Convention on the Protection of All Persons Against Enforced Disappearance and the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. 2. Guarantee protection and freedom of expression of political figures, journalists and human rights defenders against impunity from perpetrators of violence against them. 3. Guarantee the right of access of women and girls to sexual and reproductive health and facilitate full sexual education. 4. Ensure the respect for independence of the judiciary and guarantee the rights of all persons accused to a fair trial. 5. Guarantee the protection of LGBTI persons against violence, harassment and arbitrary arrests. We wish every success to Rwanda in the UPR. Thank you.
So here, both Chile and France have made some recommendations related to ratification of the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. There was an important difference in their recommendations. Did Jeff or Isaac, did you happen to notice what was different about those?
Yeah, the difference from the recommendations, like I should say something. I think they have done a good job when it comes to women empowerment and child abuse, like, you know, and sex trafficking. There are some good changes. I think they just did good job. But when it comes to forced disappearance, it's just nothing has been done, and I don't think they did not do anything about it. Nothing has been changed on forced disappearance, but they have done things to improve women, which is really great, and child abuse, and just try to fight for human trafficking and sex trafficking. Yeah, they have done some good jobs, but nothing on forced disappearance. We have seen numbers of people have been disappeared, people have been dead and, you know, killed in very mysterious ways. And yeah, nothing has been done on forced disappearance. Yeah.
So as you mentioned when we first started out today, you mentioned that there were some improvements concerning women's rights, and the delegate from Chile recognized that in their statement and said they commended Rwanda on that, but then went on to recommend that Rwanda consider the possibility of ratifying the Convention on Enforced Disappearances. But at the same time, or meanwhile, France recommended that Rwanda ratify the convention. And it doesn't sound very different, but it actually can be a significant difference for the purposes of the UPR. because Chile's recommendation was soft. It didn't say ratify it, it said consider ratifying it. So when we get to the end of this process and Rwanda has to say whether or not it accepts recommendations, it's possible that it will not accept France's recommendation to ratify the treaty, but it might accept Chile's recommendation to consider ratifying it. And in fact, Rwanda, the government has said elsewhere that you know they are considering ratifying various treaties that they haven't yet ratified. So that's a significant decision. They might accept that recommendation. And while it's good to have a recommendation on a topic that the government might actually accept, even if it's not ready to actually do the thing, they'll consider doing it. But the trouble, on the other hand, is that considering it is kind of vague and it's hard to monitor, you know, to see if they really have implemented that. Do they have to really seriously consider it, such as, you know, having bills introduced and debated in the legislature, or can they just, you know, have a quick conversation about it and say, no, we don't think so, and say they considered it. So that's kind of the problem area there. So these two recommendations about the Enforced Disappearances Treaty, Jeff, would you say, in your experience of Rwanda, that ratification of this treaty would be a really important step for Rwanda? And do you think that these recommendations will put any pressure on the government to do that?
I think when they do ratifying, and I think ratification will be helpful if they do that. But the other thing is, which might be the big problem, even though they ratified, that it's just a silence inside the country. It's really hard to know what is really going on inside. There is very serious silence, and they silence everything from the source. So yeah, I think they should go, if they will accept and ratify that, that would be nice. Yeah, but with this constant pressure of recommendations too, I think both of them should praise some positive change.
So when the Justice Minister said at the outset, talking about the freedom of information, that the satisfaction of Rwandans with their access to information had increased to something like 94%, doesn't sound like you think that's accurate.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really great question. I think there are some good changes that have been done I think there are good changes happened in information sector. We have seen some of increase in technology in information area, and I think it's a great thing. But when it comes to the facts, when it comes to the data, the percentage is something I think we all know. It's just it's falsified data. It might be not accurate. It might be not 95 for more than 90%, as he said, but there are some good changes in information. But what is the information content? He's just saying those information are censored. Even though Rwandans are able to access the information more than 90%, as he said, which is not true. It might be lower than that, but it depends on which information the government is pushing. That's the information people access, but people have radios, people will have televisions, people have phones have been gone up, depends on changing. I mean, depends on increase in economic growth. We have seen also rise in information technology area because of economic growth. Yeah.
So in terms of just having the facilities and the equipment to access information, there's a lot of improvement.
Yeah, compared to recent years, there is positive improvement in having those devices to access information.
Okay. Now we are going to listen to.
Can I interject for just a moment? I just want to compliment Jeff. I think you have a future as a diplomat, because you'll notice that Jeff was doing something that a lot of the diplomats will do in their precious 1 minute, 5 seconds, which is say something nice, say something good, sort of butter them up to say, oh, we really like this one thing, and here's our criticism. And that's something, you know, not everyone does that. Some people like rush to criticize, but it's a good example to say, if you want your recommendations to be well received, you may want to start with pointing out some sign of progress, you know, something good, and you'll see a lot of diplomats doing that. And also going back to the comment Lisa made about the 2 different recommendations and consider, and what it means to consider, that they just have to think about it for a moment and then say, okay, we're done. You know, usually as members of civil society, we expect if a government says it will consider something, that there should be some tangible proof that they took some concrete step to consider. So maybe it's holding a hearing, maybe it's, you know, doing a, you know, call-in session on radio or something like that. There should be something visible, tangible that people can point to say, here is when they did this specific thing to consider the recommendation. So, you know, we hope that if a government accepts recommendations, and they have the choice to reject them, so they don't have to accept them, but if they accept them, they will accept it in good faith, and that they will do something then in good faith during the next 4 years to implement those recommendations, something concrete we can all point to. So sorry for interjecting. Go ahead, Lisa. Where are we going next?
So now we are going to listen to the recommendations made by Spain, Sweden, and Ghana.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Spain welcomes the delegation of Rwanda. We thank them for taking part in this exercise and for the presentation, and we commend the progress made in the field of human rights. However, we regret the ongoing enforced disappearances, arbitrary and prolonged detentions, extrajudicial killings, as well as cases of torture and ill treatment in detention centres. We therefore recommend, first of all, to carry out independent investigations into all allegations of human rights violations and to bring the perpetrators to justice. Secondly, to remove from legislation any provision that violates freedom of expression. Thirdly, to fully ensure the right to freedom of association. And fourthly, to protect the legitimate work of human rights defenders and political dissidents. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Sweden.
Sweden commends Rwanda for the high representation of women in public institutions and the ambition to further improve gender equality. However, further efforts are needed to address gender-based violence. The removal of provisions on defamation in the new penal code is a positive step for the freedom of expression. Remaining restrictions on the freedom of assembly, association and expression need to also be addressed. Sweden would like to make the following recommendations. 1. To guarantee the freedoms of assembly, association and expression by, inter alia, increasing space for dissent and discussion and ensuring a safe and enabling environment for everyone to exercise these rights. 2. To ensure due process and conduct effective and objective investigations regarding cases of alleged arbitrary arrest, detention and extrajudicial executions, including those which may constitute enforced disappearance. 3. To implement the law on prevention and punishment of gender-based violence and ensure zero tolerance among law enforcing agencies for gender-based violence. I thank you.
Thank you. Switzerland.
Just give me a moment to find Ghana here.
Madam President, Ghana welcomes Rwanda to the UPR Working Group. Ghana's delegation commends the Rwandan government for the commitment to promoting, protecting, and respecting human rights in the country through the holding of a referendum and revision of the Constitution, which dedicated an entire chapter on human rights and freedom. We also take note with admiration the increase in women's representation in higher decision-making positions. Ghana's delegation makes the following recommendations. 1. Intensify its efforts to ensure full enjoyment of the right to freedom of expression, peaceful assembly, and association. 2. Ensure that the right to freedom of religion or belief is guaranteed and protected within Rwanda, and that religious minorities are treated equally as regards their human rights and fundamental freedoms. Our delegation wishes Rwanda a successful UPR outcome. I thank you.
Thank you.
So in these sets of recommendations, we've again heard some of the problems relating to the issue of enforced disappearances, and we've talked a little bit about how that manifests itself. And then we've also heard all three countries making recommendations about the freedom of expression and freedom of association, and those were, three examples among many that were made. And in particular, I wanted to ask about freedom of association and political opponents of the government and their supporters. Thoughts about how political opposition is being handled in Rwanda, and what you think about these recommendations and whether they'll help.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Lisa. The recommendations were good, especially from Spain and Sweden. But with when they talked about of course, those forced disappearances, first of all, it is in the government's interest, to keep people in fear, not to bother doing that. So I don't see that going to happen, stopping that. I don't see that happen because that's what they would like, to keep people in fear. Yeah, but also when they recommend that there should be freedom of expression, what and what, the thing is, the government is I would say, just this, in my own view, that is scared to see how much people, the opposition can maybe pull to their side. Let's say the opposition leader or figure wants to make a rally in the capital. So the government wouldn't want to see so many people, young people, moving towards the opposition. So it will do anything in its capability to see that that doesn't happen at all, and to portray to the world that you see, the president is very popular because if he goes somewhere, he has a big number of people following him. But when you look the other side with the opposition, pretty much they are never allowed even to campaign or make any kind of gathering. If they if they say or do anything that is really that the government sees as a threat, they will definitely be arrested and tortured from wherever they will be. So that's my observation with what maybe goes on in the country. And also, Spain talked about the work they are doing with women equality. I also applaud them for that, for sure. At least that one, it's visible even to anybody who is not living there. But the fact that sometimes cross border. I know what is happening the other side. So they really do. They have done a good work with that, like empowering women and helping them have a voice, like in their communities and leadership and wherever an opportunity rises for them. So that one is good on their side. Yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Well, the presidential candidate who opposed the president during the last election cycle was put in prison, wasn't she?
Yeah, come again.
Yeah, there was a woman presidential candidate who ran in the last election and was arrested and imprisoned. She's called Diane Rwingara. Yeah, so the government did anything possible that, first of all, like maybe cut off like finance, source of finance to her campaigns, limit access to people so she doesn't like put out that change message to the people, limited her through like she wasn't being hosted like on televisions, on radio stations, so that because most rural people listen to these like radio stations, they have access to that, but still the talk shows, the radio shows, they are regulated by the government. So there isn't anything going against the government that is being that is led to go up to the rural areas and across the country. So she was limited access to such modes of communication. So it was really a hard situation for her. One thing that still challenges my mind is like in most of these governments, like I shouldn't see why they should be even holding elections, because they hold election in which they must win. You know, like they don't level the ground for everybody. Like they don't level the ground to make it leveled for everyone. Like to get to do anything that can make them win. So it's a must win for them, and wasting actually taxpayers' money, because during such periods there is a lot of arrests, there is a lot of torture, there's a lot of like inhuman things that happen to opposition leaders, which I think shouldn't be happening anyways, just to preserve humanity and to also prevent loss of lives. So yeah, that's what I would say maybe about it. Thank you, Jeff. Any thoughts on these recommendations?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say me?
Yes, your thoughts about these recommendations on freedom of expression.
Oh yeah. Oh, these recommendations are really, you know, they are good. I think they are really nice, and that's what a Dutch country should be recommending. But it's not gonna happen. I'm just glad my friend neighbor knows everything about my country. It's just not going to change anything. But I know as someone who lived inside the country since I was young, I just know it's not going to change their mind. And sometimes they just say things, you know, they say things just to the world, to, you know, to make the image look better. But if you can go inside, it's different from what is being spoken outside, what is being taught, what is being communicated. Super different, two sides, totally black and white. It's just not true. And I will also say something on assembly and association for Sweden. I think it's from Sweden recommendation about freedom of association. It's it's very strange or fun to say this, but if you see the government of Rwanda, it's in brief, it's like a communist party in East Africa. It's like a small communist party regime. They won't allow you to participate in political arena if you are not attached to the ruling regime, to the ruling party. They won't allow you. They will do whatever they can to silence your association or your group even before it emerges, even before people know you. They will do everything they want. It's even I think we do have some more than 3-4 political parties other than the ruling party, but they are just fake parties. Actually, I'm saying this because I know they are fake parties. They are under the supreme regime. They are under ruling party. They are not different. It's just one party, which is presented in two various in different types. I mean, in more than 3 or 4 parties, but it's just one party.
So just to create the appearance of,
yeah, just to make good appearance. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about the economic progress that's been made in Rwanda, and do you think that economic progress and how it has changed Rwanda's image is helping or hurting in terms of these other human rights issues and how the international community looks at them?
Can you say again?
Yeah.
I just want to hear the relationship about economy and human rights.
We know that there has been economic progress, which you mentioned in Rwanda, so things about poverty and employment have improved a lot.
Yes.
And that has improved Rwanda's image in the international community.
Yes.
Do you think that that change in Rwanda's image is making it easier or harder for international community to look at some of these other issues we're talking about, like the freedom of expression or like enforced disappearances? Is it taking attention away from those things at all?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. And that's one of the points. Government also it's one thing the government sells every time to the world. That's the narrative they sell to everyone. They want to convince. No one really can deny super rapid development happened in very recent years. It's very obvious, everyone can see it, and we give them congratulations, and we really appreciate, and we just give them we clap for them for what they did. But they also use that cover just to let the world not know what is happening inside. They will speak more about economic development and growth. They will also use women empowerment. They have done in parliament. It's the #1 country all over the world with big number of women in parliament, and that's the great. We really appreciate that, and we just want this to keep happening and just keep improving women, especially women rights in rural areas. And they have done a great job, but it's just they use that as the cover to threaten opposition, to do whatever they want to do. And yeah, that's true, because when I see most of the things Western countries and the other countries, actually, like most of Asian countries like China, they don't care about democracy. But it's very sad to see other Western countries, like, those are the countries that we always see for examples, and they are always being presented with this this cover of economic development, and sometimes some of Western readers don't want to penetrate and look inside how is the human right, what are the other things like that. No, I think they use to cover up.
Thank you. So we are going to play one more recommendation from the country of Georgia.
Gabon.
Georgia welcomes the delegation of Rwanda and thanks the head of delegation for the presentation of the national report. We welcome Rwanda's open door policy towards refugees that has uninterruptedly continued despite the closure of the borders to contain the COVID-19 pandemic, and appreciate the country's efforts to improve the basic human rights and living conditions of asylum seekers. Georgia positively notes steps taken by the government towards preventing and eliminating all forms of gender-based violence, as well as continuous efforts to fight and prevent human trafficking in the country. We recommend the government of Rwanda: 1. Accelerate the process of adoption of National Action Plan on counter-human trafficking. 2. To reinvigorate its efforts to combat all forms of gender-based violence against a woman. 3. To continue its efforts aimed at raising public awareness on the genocide prevention and combat its ideology.
Thank you. Germany.
So the one thing I wanted to particularly ask about in this recommendation was that last mention of the continuing efforts to prevent, to raise awareness about genocide prevention and combat its ideology. And I know that there was mention in the government's opening statement about their law on the prevention of genocide ideology and their efforts toward unification. So I wanted to ask what thoughts you have about the law and how it's working, and whether or not this unification that the government spoke of whether there's progress being made on that.
Oh, okay. Isaac wanted to say something. Oh, Isaac wanted to say something. Yeah.
No, actually, I was going to ask her to say that again. Like, I might have missed a point or two. I was focusing so much. There's a question that Kata shared, so it's the one I was trying to reply to.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and I was actually going to read that question so we could talk about it after we just mentioned this
I wasn't sure if to type the answer or to wait and talk about it.
Talk about it in just a minute.
Okay.
So on the issue of the genocide prevention and combating genocide ideology, I wanted to see if you had any comments about the Rwandan law on prohibiting genocide ideology, how that's working in Rwanda, whether it's doing good or not, and whether or not the unification that the Justice Minister spoke of is that progressing.
Okay, yeah, thanks again for the opportunity. Yeah, so in my view, I feel like maybe when this government had just gotten in power, they really did a good job, like trying to unify the country and orienting people's minds away from genocidal thoughts, what. Those areas, they really did a very good job. But now there is a trend of like sidelining another tribe. So I feel like right at the moment, like one tribe is benefiting so much from the government and sidelining the other. So I feel there is so much so much hate that might be embedded in people's minds and hearts right now that you never know when it can explode into something real bad. So I think, and the fact that people can't speak it in public, so you can't know what they are thinking. But if you just, there's some sort of disparity in the government's top positions where you see it's leaning towards maybe one prominent tribe, so it doesn't reflect the whole nationality of Rwanda, I would say. So of course these are things that I myself see, somebody else can see, in Rwanda. You can never know what they might be thinking. So they might. So if the government can work towards addressing that sort of disparity in racial distribution, on the national and both on the national and community levels, in terms of in terms of government resource, laying out resources to the public, in that kind of formality. I think it can help out to cover any sort of racial inequality or tribal inequality in Rwanda that might, you never know what might come up in the next 20 years, or if the trend continues.
So unequal distribution of resources maybe is contributing to this kind of feeling becoming worse again.
Yeah, and somebody who's in Rwanda you can tell, because if you looked at the cabinet ministers, most of them are from over maybe 70% are from a certain tribe, and 20% maybe from this the other tribe, which obviously in their defense they might say that these are the people who have gone to school, these are the people who are maybe qualified for these positions. But exactly, so that's the problem is coming right down from what? From the community level, where we see one tribe is empowered, they can take their kids to school, nice schools, good universities, and this other tribe, because of economic inequality that is leaning towards them, they can't afford maybe to teach their kids in good schools. So that kind of, so it is arising from the community level up to the national level. So I think something should be done in that manner too. Yeah.
Jeff, anything to add on that topic?
Oh yeah, I should say, yeah, that's true, but it's not very strong. When you see how economy and wealth are divided among the tribes, because mostly two dominant tribes in Rwanda are Hutu and Tutsi. But when you see how the wealth is being shared, it's not much about the tribe disparities. I think when you go to see the economic structure the government now is just trying to implement, is wealth will be allocated to few percentage of the people, mostly from the Tutsi tribe, actually, but not the whole tribe. I'm sorry, I won't agree totally with Isaac because on that, because I think the whole Tutsi, because now the government is from the Tutsi tribe, which is obvious and which what we know. But I'm from Tutsi side, I'm from Tutsi tribe, but I have lived under constant poverty, and I have never seen very tremendous support from the government. Actually, I think I did receive what other children can receive. I was able to secure a government scholarship because I did great in my school. But I think the wealth is going to be allocated into few percentage of the elite people from the Tutsi tribe, but not the whole tribe. And I would also want to share something on genocide ideologies, laws, which have been put in place to prevent genocide ideologies. I think it's a double sword. It helps to reduce the genocide ideology, but it has also been used to prevent opposition from the Hutu tribe to, which is even the majority of the Rwandans, but those laws have been used to prevent them to participate in politics. And yeah, I think it has played a very good role on one side and has also harmed other people on the other side. It's very difficult to say you are going to play politics, even though it's not allowed actually to go against the government. But it's hard for, I think it's hard that even though it's all hard, but it might be harder for Hutu assembly association from the Hutu tribe. It might be real hard. It might be real harder for them to express their opinions compared to Tutsi. Actually, what I think I'm glad my friend shared the real story about Diane Rwigara. She's from Tutsi side. But it's very, very, very difficult to see an individual from Hutu tribe who is like, I'm going to run for the president. And I have these views which are totally against the government direction. That's not going to happen anytime tomorrow. That's not going to happen, yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, before we wrap up, we have a question from someone who's watching. And the question is, living standards have increased considerably for many Rwandans under Kagame. At the same time, there are more human rights abuses. Is the average Rwandan aware of and concerned about these human rights abuses? Or is there more complacency because the economic times are good? Thoughts about that question? We talked about how the economic situation affects international community opinion, but what about the average Rwandan?
Yeah, I would say, the average Rwandan, they know about the human rights abuses that's going on in the country, but like we know, you cannot even say anything. You cannot say anything about it, not even to your friend, because you never know what they can be able to talk or say against you to the government officials. So you just keep it to yourself. So they know what's happening, but they can't talk about it. And also what I have come to realize is that most of, like, especially the average Rwandans, they wouldn't care much who is the president, as long as like they feel there is peace in the country overall. If they feel like if they can find something to eat, which comes into the economics of the country, if they can find something to eat for the day or for the night and sleep peacefully that night, they won't care about who is the president. But also, let's not forget the fact that unless it's really your family or your or personally, you become a victim of such human rights abuses, that's when you realize that things are not really good for anybody in the country. So when it hits home, like they say, it hits harder. So yeah, that now changes everything. So as long as they can sleep well, eat, they don't care whether Kagame is the president, whether who is the president. But once your relative or son or daughter is the victim of his mass persecution of opposition dissidents, then things become worse on your side. Yeah.
Thank you. Jeff, any final thoughts about that?
Yeah, I would say Rwandans, most of them can display themselves in two different parts or two different pages when it's just hard to understand the real situation, but sometimes they are happy and they are not happy. They are both two things. I think they are glad for economic improvements, but they are also hurt. They are also feeling sad inside. For people who have freedom, for people who have democracy, they are very, very sad about it. Yeah, that's what I can share.
Thank you. Amy, any thoughts about anything we talked about?
I think it's been really helpful to hear from both Jeff and Isaac about their perspectives. Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess in closing, I'd like to hear whether they have any optimism about the recommendations, what the government of Rwanda will do, whether there's any ray of light to look at for the future of human rights in Rwanda.
Yeah, I like to keep an open mind that things would definitely change someday, but this would it would easily come when the international community, the UN, and the Western countries put much pressure onto the government, so it's forced to work for the people, not just like writing statements, but let them be pressured like to work for the people, like not just issuing out statements condemning something, because that one it never moves them at all. Because yeah, but if there is continuously pressure like coming from let's say the United States and maybe conditioning some sort of aid that might be going to the country, maybe it can wake them up and realize that what they're doing right now is not in line with the international community accords and international human rights. So yeah, but I hope, because I don't think the current president will definitely be president for life, so there will always be change. You never know when it will come, but there will be change.
Jeff, what about you?
Oh, there is optimism. Yeah, actually, there is optimism. I do have hope that things might change sometime in the future, but I do also want to recommend you when to do more than listening and just try to go on the ground and see what is government is saying and compare to what they observe from the ground. I would recommend you when to do that. Don't listen to what they say. Actually, don't, because they say one side of things. They don't say the whole story. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for joining us for this debriefing on the Universal Periodic Review of Rwanda, and especially to Jeff and Isaac for all of the really interesting perspectives that they have been able to share with us today. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, you too.